Good afternoon and welcome to the November 18th, 2009 Civil Service meeting. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Devine?
Here.
Commissioner Carrion?
Here.
Commissioner Manukian?
Here.
Commissioner Coleman?
Here.
And for the record, Commissioner Gantis is absent.
What is next?
Minutes?
Move for approval without reading.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Devine?
Yes.
Commissioner Manukian?
Oh, yes.
Commissioner Carrion?
Yes.
Commissioner Coleman?
Abstain. Next item.
Oral communications?
I have no cards. Is there anyone in the audience that wants to speak to some issue not on the agenda? Hearing none. Oral communications is closed. Next item.
Recruitment and examination status report?
Mr. Doyle.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, this item is our regular recruitment and examination status report. Indicates the recruitments that are in various stages, along with exam dates and posting dates. They're listed by the analyst, and any questions on those, I'd be happy to try and answer them.
Any questions? Hearing none. Next item.
Eligible list established.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, this item is, again, a note and file item with addressing the eligibility lists that have been established since our last meeting. As you can see, there are 4 lists that have been established. They all happen to be promotional. The title of the exam is listed, as is the number of applications received, as well as those who made the eligibility list in the far right column. Again, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer those for you.
Any questions? Hearing none. Next item.
Class specifications for approval, integrated resources planning administrator, power contracts manager, and power planning manager.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, it's been a while since we brought a whole series of new classifications to you. Seems like we've saved them up for this particular meeting, but we have quite a few to go through. A lot coming from Water and Power, and a lot addressing some of the new directions that they're taking. This first set of specifications relate to the Power Resource Management Group, and the 3 new classifications being developed there: an Integrated Resources Planning Administrator, Power Contracts Administrator Manager, and Power Planning Manager. Again, these are some very key positions in our Power Resource Management Group, dealing with lots of very, very important financial resources, as well as the contracts for purchasing of our power and distribution. We do have staff here to address these. If you want to go through them one by one or take them as a group, we can look at it that way. Mr. Steiger, who's the general manager for our Water and Power, is here, as is Mr. Steve Lenz, who's the assistant GM for Supply, and Miss Marina Klein, who put together these specifications. So if you have questions, go ahead and try and answer them.
Yes.
Are these new positions, Mr. Doyle?
These are new classifications. As far as budgeted positions, I'd probably need the department to explain where they're coming from, but essentially GWP does a lot with as far as taking vacant positions and turning them into something different, and I think that's the case in this particular circumstance. We'll have Steve Lenz address that.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, Steve Lenz, Assistant General Manager Supply. We've taken 3 existing positions and reallocated them to this group, so it is position neutral.
Are these 3 positions? I noticed one of the. These are more in the mid-management. Are they equivalent positions? In other words, are we creating positions that are going to be dollar neutral, positive to the city, or negative?
There's a slight increase. I actually didn't bring all the salary numbers with me today. I believe it's in the range of $40,000 to $50,000 a year for all 3 positions.
Why do we need to change these? Take the vacant positions and create these positions?
We had Back in the 90s, we had a group of 3. Prior to deregulation, we were leaning out our staff in order to get ready for deregulation, and we took this group down to 1, which was a principal electric engineer. So that position, the person that was in that position retired in '02, and we tried to recruit for that position a few times, and were unsuccessful because it's very difficult to get engineers. When I came on board a little over a year ago, we started talking to the other cities, and it turns out in most of the cities with this position actually don't have an engineer in the position. There's really no engineering required. It's more resource management, negotiating new renewable energy projects, negotiating contracts, looking at NERC, WEC reliability issues. So we looked at all the other cities and looked at what they were doing and looked at comparable positions and created 3 positions to handle all of these new areas that we've got to deal with. And the 3 primary issues are renewable energy projects that are being mandated by the state. Glendale has its own renewable energy portfolio standard, but there's a state mandate looming of 33%. So we're working with all of the SCAPA utilities to look at over 100 projects to meet that mandate. So that's one primary area. The 2 other areas are reliability requirements that have come out of FERC, or the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. That's about a full-time equivalent just on its own, and right now it's being handled by an engineer in another group, in the distribution group. And then finally, all of the reporting that goes along with all of these greenhouse gas mandates. We now have over 45 reports that are going to the CEC and CARB, the Air Resources Board, and the EPA. These are just the main areas that have been added to this function in the last 5 years or so.
Well, I'm looking at at least 2 of them. Let me see if the third one. We're still asking for bachelor's degrees, but we're expanding beyond beyond just a certain kind of engineering. Is that correct?
Correct.
So we're in business administration or public or finance or accounting. So the old positions basically were limited to the engineering field?
It was a principal electric engineer. Was the old position, was the single old position. The other 2 positions that were reallocated, that we are reallocating, is the plant superintendent and a senior mechanical engineer.
You say the plant superintendent.
Grayson
we have more.
Power.
Oh, Grayson.
Grayson Power Plant
That's my point.
Superintendent.
We have more than one plant, so
That's our local generation.
that's the only one we have. I thought we had more than one plant.
We've got several outside the city. We've got one here in the geographic boundaries of Glendale. There's several units at that location, but we refer to it as Grayson Power Plant.
That's all I have.
Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
First of all, you said 40 to 50,000 per each position, or for
Total for all 3.
And then the power contract manager, the experience, it says that it can have contract administration, resource planning, resource operation, control area operations, which is the same as power planning manager and some of the other ones. Wouldn't the contract manager be required to have extensive contract administration, period? I mean, you're hiring a power contract manager, wouldn't you require them to have extensive contract administration, power contract administration
Let me look at the actual
experience?
spec that you're referring to.
You're talking about the power, Mr.
Power contract manager.
Experience requires that.
I mean, you're putting resource planning, resource operation, control area operations, and
It's, the first essential functions, identifying and assisting in negotiation and evaluation of contracts.
I'm looking at the experience side.
Okay, pardon me.
It's there.
It's essentially the same experience as planning.
More limited is what
It's the exact same experience as power planning manager.
I don't know.
With essentially the power contracts manager's job would be to
Yeah, I'm looking at the
Negotiate
contract
value
manager,
of
power system contracts, planning and/or operations with specific knowledge of California ISO. So it's got the power systems contract experience, knowledge of power systems contracts, which is a broad area. And your question is, why is that the same as the power planning manager?
What I'm asking is, this particular position is power contracts manager. I'm assuming that they'll be dealing with a whole lot of contracts, correct?
Correct?
And I'm looking at the experience, and I think that the extensive experience needs to be not one of the following, but the extensive experience should be contract administration, period. I mean, why would somebody who has a controlled area operations have really that experience? Why would that experience be that essential to power contracts manager's position?
Well, we actually are going to be trying to use both these positions to cover various areas, broad areas. Their primary function is contract management. Okay.
These positions work.
Please introduce yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Glenn Steiger, General Manager, GWP. And just as an adjunct discussion here, the positions are dealing with power procurement and trading in the very broadest sense of the word, which is what we do. And they are looking at establishing contractual agreements with many, many, many different counterparties. And the way it works today in the markets that we work in, it's an absolute requirement that whoever does this does not only understand the contractual nature of this job, in other words, dealing with contract management, but also understands the dynamics of the markets that we work in. That's equally, in fact, it's probably equally or even more important to understand those dynamics. And we work in many different markets. We work in energy markets, capacity markets, forward capacity markets. Now we'll be dealing with the ISO, even though we're not part of the ISO. We will be dealing in those markets, which are quite complex. So a background in understanding the markets is equal to understanding the contracts and the contractual language that we'll have to deal with in those markets. So it's more of, even though it's a contract manager position, it's really an understanding of the marketplace that drives it.
Then my question would be, why wouldn't you just not have a power contract manager heading and just hire someone under power planning manager and just have them do the same thing, as long as the essential function seems to be pretty much the same, and the experience is exactly the same, and the education is exactly the same?
Well, because one person will be dealing with the establishing of the contracts within those markets. The other person will be scheduling and understanding the dynamics of scheduling that energy and the capacity also in those markets. So there is a difference between those two, but this experience clearly overlaps. There's no question about that.
Say to create another heading when that heading could be taken care of by the first heading. I mean, just seems like the power planning manager could actually do that function. So we don't have to create a separate heading for it would be just one heading, power planning manager. You assign one person to do the contract management, and then you do the other one. So we are not actually creating a separate heading for that person.
Yeah, I understand.
But if you want, if that's not going to work, then you definitely want to have a separate heading on that. Then is what your department desires.
I understand.
I have no further question. Thank you.
My question is, are we approving all of these together, or are we going one by one?
Mr. Doyle?
You can by motion, you could approve them all together, unless there's a specific item or amendment you're seeking. So,
I move for approval of all three positions.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Devine?
Yes.
Abkarian?
Yes.
Manukian?
Yes.
Gantis?
Yes.
Coleman?
Yes. And
Thank you.
without, you're probably already taking care of this. Commissioner Gantis walked in at about 5 minutes after 5, and I just want that.
3.
3 minutes after 5, I just want that
5 minutes after 3.
clear. Next item, please.
2 minutes early.
Class
2
specific-
hours and 5 minutes early.
Class specification for approval, mechanical engineer series.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, this item is relatively simple. We have an existing mechanical engineer series, and as we have with other job series within the engineering disciplines, we are seeking to add a principal level to this. Up until this point, the mechanical engineering function has been relatively limited. We've had a few of them within the power plant, but we're seeking to create this principal level position, and I understand at some point in the future we may have the requirement for mechanical engineering function within the water section as well. But for the purposes of this action, we're simply seeking to add the principal level. We currently have that in our civil engineering series as well as our electrical engineering series. So with that, this item is brought before you. If you have any questions, again, this is coming out of GWP, so we have all the same folks are here to answer any questions.
Any questions? Yes.
Why do we need it? Other than every other classification has it.
Well, I think the intent is to promote somebody to this level, and previously we had a principal electrical engineer at a comparable position within the power management group, and that person has since retired, and we're seeking to replace him not with an electrical, but with a mechanical, somebody with a mechanical background. So I believe that's the intent. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong.
I have a question.
Sure. I'm done.
Still, I just have under the notes, under the mechanical engineer series, it says there's no equivalent for registration as a professional mechanical engineer with the state of California.
That's correct.
What is that?
In the majority of in fact, all of our class specifications, you'll see the note indicating that an equivalent combination of experience, education may be substituted for required experience in another area. And traditionally, what that does is gives us some leeway if someone is lacking a couple of units close to their degree, or if they're a year or two shy in one area, but they make up for it in another area. That little note section there would give us the leeway to reasonably apply some type of a substitution clause. When we're talking about engineers, and particularly in this case, it's a registered engineer, we are not allowed to do that. We can't accept some type of substitution clause for, say, someone who has lots of experience in engineering, but who does not have their state-registered license. So that's all that's saying, that there is no recognized comparability for or recognized substitution for that professional engineering license.
How about the sentence on top? It says an equivalent combination of experience, education, and/or training may substitute for the listed minimum requirements.
Correct, for the minimum requirements, but we could not apply that clause to the requirement that this individual be a licensed engineer. We can't apply it in that instance. We could apply it for experience or some other facet of the experience or minimum qualifications.
Wouldn't it be more grammatically correct to, at the end, just say after minimum requirements, except that there is no equivalent for registration as a professional mechanical engineer with the state of California?
Or you say, however, comma, there is...
Something like that.
Yeah, we could do that if that would make it more clear.
I think it would.
Move to approve.
With what, however?
With the changes noted.
However? Or accept
No.
that? We want
With
yours or
with
mine?
yours. Well, I'll go with yours. I'll go with
Second.
yours, except.
Second.
Roll call?
Because then I'll
Commissioner
give it to
Devine?
the next month and a half.
Commissioner Manukian?
Yes.
Commissioner Abkarian?
Yes.
Gantes?
Yes.
Coleman?
Yes.
Would have voted no if it is his language, I'll tell you.
I know you would have. That's why I said yours.
No, that's okay. I would have gone along with the other.
Hi, John.
Next item?
Class specification for approval, Revenue Protection Coordinator.
Okay.
I just have one question.
We've made this before.
Right at the very beginning, under definitions, under general supervision, who's going to be supervising the revenue protection coordinator? I don't need a name,
Chairman
just the job title.
Coleman, according to the organization chart, it looks like they would report directly to the customer service administrator.
Is that correct? Okay. Any other questions?
He hasn't even read it in the record yet.
Pardon
And
me?
he hasn't done his report yet.
Oh, sorry.
If we don't need it, that's fine.
If you want to hear me speak,
Go ahead.
do so. All right. This is, again, a new classification dealing, of course, with revenue protection, and really a function that I think more and more utilities are recognizing that there's a lot going on with regard to energy theft and tampering of meters and unauthorized use of meters. And this is a position which would be dedicated to sort of rooting out those problems and in a fairly aggressive way in dealing with these situations to avoid the loss of revenue to the city. And one of those rare circumstances where I think a position that would likely pay for itself as far as saving the city revenue. So with that, once again, this is GWP position. Ms. Valier is here. Mr. Steiger, and once again, Ms. Klein is here as well. If you have any questions.
Quick question. Under license and certificates, power of arrest,
Yeah, exactly my question.
can somebody explain?
It's a very good question. And what are we going to be doing in the meantime if we hire somebody that doesn't have the powers to arrest?
Chair Coleman, members of Commission, Tammy Valier, Customer Services Administrator. That was actually a recommendation for this person who would actually be testifying. There's not the intention of them to actually use the powers of arrest, but it's more of a credential for being an expert witness in court if we do prosecute. All of the people who are qualified to apply for this position have gone through or are in the process of going through this course.
I think the question was, what is it?
It actually does give the powers of arrest. Our neighborhood services people, for example, who issue citations actually carry that certificate.
That's where the concern comes in. I just want to clarify. I mean, we've heard some horror stories, and my intention is, when you indicate power of arrest, you just indicated that they're not going to actually be doing it, but can we get that clarified? You know, in my opinion, that's why we have the police department. I'm much more comfortable having someone, if there is going to be issue of an arrest, having it done through the police department versus, we've heard some issues with neighborhood services, people going there, identifying themselves with the city, and so I just want that clarified a little bit further. If they're not authorized or they're not going to be arresting anyone, let's make it clarified.
Excuse me. That is clarified, I believe, in the Glendale Municipal Code, that they do not actually have, not so much our classification, but even the neighborhood services investigators, I believe, do not actually have the authorization to make the arrest. So it is specified in the Glendale Municipal Code. I don't exactly know the section, but we did do research on that before making the classification.
Maybe
We
I'm
also
not-
have it in our written
I
policies.
think we need to, Mr. Chairman, I think we need to have a little more explanation of what this actual certificate is. I mean,
My
it says
understanding-
powers of arrest, but I think we need that.
Well, I do too, and the thought that comes to my mind: we hire a revenue protection coordinator, and he catches somebody with his hands in the cookie jar. What's he going to do? Call the police?
In many cases, yes. Most of our cases, we won't call the police. We will actually do an investigation and bill the customer.
No, I mean a
for it
dead
without-
out caught, loading pipe into his pickup truck, at the end of his shift. Just as an example.
We would call the
Dead
police.
to right, caught, no questions asked.
We would call the police.
Isn't this
And
more...
we are working with the police department and the city attorney's office on all of our written policies and procedures.
John?
Mr. Chairman, I mean, I guess then I go back. It was my understanding from this position that it's basically those people that have doctored their meters or somehow are
Into somebody else.
tapped into somebody else's meter, and that this person might find that by actually going out to the residence and sees the line or sees that something is and I guess going on with what Mr. Manukian said, what happens then? They're there, and we see at Joe Jones's house that Bill Blass, his next door neighbor, there's a line running from his, and we hear that because Bill Blass has complained about his $2,500 utility bill, and I assume that's when you find that out, when Bill Blass complains. What does this revenue protection coordinator do when they're there and they see that?
This position is primarily for people who are stealing from the utilities. So if somebody is stealing from their neighbor, of course we would call the police because they're not stealing from us, they're stealing from the neighbor. We may even involve neighborhood services in that instance because it may be a code enforcement issue. If they're stealing from us, we would disconnect their service and we would take any of the evidence, which is another reason for the power of arrest certificate, because they need to know how to handle evidence and how to document the case and prepare it for court. Even if we don't plan to prosecute, we have to, from the very beginning, make sure that everything is proper in case we do prosecute. So in some cases, like you said, if we find them with their hand in the cookie jar and there is any interaction with the customer that may not be safe, or that we feel that there may be an arrest, then we would call the police, and we have so. In the very recent, we've had 53 instances of theft, and any time that we had any danger or interaction with the customer where we needed the police assistance, they were there.
Sure.
Go ahead.
I have two questions. One is, and I'm still never say this should be an easy one because you know what happens. My understanding is if you actually have the certificate, you have the power to actually arrest an individual under that certificate or POST 832 Penal Code. Is that correct?
Yeah, to be honest with you, I don't know exactly if it's two phases of the certificate that actually give you the powers to arrest.
I see a shake by one of our officers saying that will give you a power to actually arrest someone with that certificate.
Our purpose for having these people trained is so that they know how to gather evidence, they know how to interview, they know the procedures and techniques that they need to take place. They were taught how to interact with people, how to approach people, when not to approach people. It was more for
My
expertise
question was
in
that
testifying.
if you really are looking at enforcement, which is what I'm hoping that you guys are looking at, why wouldn't, and how much does this person get paid approximately? What's the salary range?
We haven't proceeded.
What do you
with that.
think it's going to be approximately?
I think it was
So it's
$5,000 to $6,000 per month.
$5,000 to $6,000 a month. Why wouldn't there be a coordination between the police department and you having a police officer or having an additional police officer just assigned to this particular task?
Well, like I said, we do have written policies and procedures, and the police department and the city attorney's office have been working very closely with us. But again, most of these cases are not going to involve actual prosecution or arrest. Most of this is going to be where we backbill the customer, and we want our payment. That's what we really want, and we want to discourage any future theft.
Okay.
Quick note, I think what you're hearing from, again, my fellow commissioners, correct me if I'm wrong, what we're trying to, I don't know if this is the correct venue word, but what we want to get across, under any circumstances, if you guys, this individual is going to be making an arrest, we would feel much more comfortable if we have one of the Glendale PD officers doing the actual arrest.
Yeah, these people will not be arresting people.
Okay. Well, see, that's for us. It's a little bit confusing when you when you put, power of arrest. That's, I think, at least that's where my thoughts are. Is that where you're going with that?
Well, if you have a certificate to arrest, you have the right to arrest. Now, if you use it or not, that's a different story, and you need to be careful as to how you use it. But if you actually get the POST 832 penal code certificate, my understanding is you have the right to arrest. You use that power or not, that is a subjective thing that each individual will use their best discretion to use. Isn't that correct?
It will not be authorized in our policy or procedure for this person to arrest. The purpose for that certificate is so that they are an expert in gathering evidence, interviewing, and testifying. But they will not have the authority to arrest under our policies and procedures.
I looked at that.
So in a nutshell, you want this individual to either possess, or in the possession of, or the ability to obtain State of California Post 832 PC certificate.
Correct.
So that they have the knowledge as to what it takes and what's entailed in arresting someone for an alleged criminal act.
The classes that are part of the post certificate.
That was a yes or no.
I'm sorry. If you could repeat it, it wasn't clear.
You're saying that this person, whoever it is, isn't going to be arresting anybody.
Correct.
But we want this person to be in possession of a certificate that would allow him or her to arrest.
Let me help you out here.
What is it?
The answer to that is no. GWP does not have the authority to arrest anyone.
And why is this in here?
Because of the experience required. The experience required to recognize and understand the criminal nature of theft of service is critical, and that's the reason for this. Okay, it's a knowledge-based requirement, but it does not give us arbitrarily the right, because through city municipal code we don't have the right at GWP to make arrests. So the intent is never to actually do an arrest; it's to understand the criminal implications of what we're seeing. Theft of service is an extremely large issue for us at GWP, and while we are not in the criminal business, we need to be able to recognize the criminal nature.
I have one quick question, Ms. White. The GWP procedure states that you are not to arrest anyone under this particular certificate. Is that correct? A written policy basically says that with GWP.
That's correct.
Okay.
And Mr. Chair, if I could add, there's nothing in the list of essential functions and duties indicating that this person will be out there arresting people. I think what they're asking for is for this person to obtain the 832 PC training, really to help them understand the nature of a chain of evidence, how to conduct investigations, and how to testify, and all that stuff. But it's very clear that they're not going to be arresting. And
Well,
if
I think that
that would be an abuse of their position.
And
that's
if I could just mention that the part of the post certificate also, there are two phases, and one of them is a firearm component that these people are not taking, because most of this curriculum, again, is like Matt mentioned, in interviewing techniques and chain.
Well, as long as the procedure says that they can't arrest someone, then they can't arrest someone. So then they can't arrest someone. So why don't we just move to
move on?
You can keep your meter the way it is, Albert. You don't have to worry about it.
I was really worried. I was saying they're going to come down,
I move for approval.
Second.
Roll call.
Commissioner Devine,
Yes.
Gantis.
Yes.
Abkarian,
Yes, as long as
Just keep
John's
on.
house is the first one they actually search.
Fanukian,
Yes, I told my
Coleman.
wife to put the wires back.
Coleman.
Yes. Next item, please.
Class specification for approval, business transformation and marketing administrator, business transformation manager, and assistant business transformation manager.
Okay. Mr. Chair, now for the easy one.
Oh, yeah. I already have a question, Mr. Steiger.
To wrap up
Why don't you pull up a chair? Just pull up a
Stay up
chair.
Now,
You brought them all at the same time.
You're right, Albert. Absolutely correct.
To conclude with water and power, we have again, it's probably one of the most revolutionary elements of the utility for quite some time, and this is dealing with the smart grid. And these are three classifications who would be forming a business unit to deal with that. We have the business transformation and marketing administrator, business transformation manager, and then the assistant business transformation manager. In addition to the smart grid communication, the administrator will also be overseeing renewable energy conservation programs and those existing programs as well. But since Mr. Steiger is already up at the podium, I won't even try to explain the intricacies of smart grid. So with that, Glenn, you may want to say a few words, or if you want to go right into questions. It's up to you, Mr. Chair.
I'd like a little explanation.
I would, sure.
Certainly.
What a smart grid is.
As I didn't understand it, I was going to just move to approve.
Like that much better.
We can do it that way, too.
No, it's okay. Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, the GWP Smart Grid project, which will take place primarily over the next 3 years.
Could you just give me a definition of what a smart
Yes.
grid is in the city
Yes.
of Glendale?
That's what I will do.
Okay.
Our smart grid project is divided into two phases. The first phase will be the changing out of all meters, both electric and water, to automate them so that they essentially read in real time, provide real-time data not only to us but to the customer at the same time. Within that first phase, we will also be building the platform so that these meters can speak to each other and communicate with us, with GWP, and all the other functions that we have that require the functionality. So that's phase one, and that's a lot of people call that the smart grid. Okay, that's just the beginning. Okay, that just establishes the ability to gather the data, to communicate, and to manipulate the data. But that's a big step. Okay, and that will happen within 2 years. Okay, so that's the very first piece, and it'll actually happen within the next 2 years, which is pretty aggressive. The second.
Let me interrupt. Will that
Sure.
do away with meter readers?
Thanks.
It will ultimately do away with the meter reading function. That is correct. Our plan is not to, quote-unquote, do away with the people that do the meter reading. Our plan is to retrain them because, as you might imagine, and I'll explain a little bit more of what Smart Grid will ultimately do, we will have a whole new world of positions and technical know-how that will be required to operate the smart grid. So we expect to utilize the positions in a new way and retrain. But yes, the functionality of meter reading will no longer be required when this metering system will be in place, which is, let's say, 2 years from now. So it's fairly aggressive. The next phase of smart grid is what really makes up what is known as the smart grid. Okay, keep in mind, we've now automated metering, we've got data. Now, how do we use that data? And the biggest single piece that we can all understand would be to automate the distribution system. For example, when the lights go out right now, you call us to let us know the lights are out. Otherwise, we really don't know right away that your lights are out. In the future, once this system is in place, we'll know at the same time you do, or before you do, that your lights are out. Plus, our system will then be automated so that it will start to self-heal. So instead of having, let's say, 5,000 customers out for an hour or two, the system itself, before we even send people out, starts to understand how to backfeed so that it narrows down, and maybe we'll only have 50 customers out for that period of time. Everybody else comes back rather quickly because the system itself is smart. Okay, that's the smart grid piece of it. So that's the most obvious. There are numerous other assets to the system, including communicating. Customers will be able to know how much energy and water they're using right now. So it's I call it the Prius effect, because if you've ever driven a hybrid, you know that you're always trying to eke that last mile per gallon out because you've got the screen. Well, now you'll have a screen in your house or in your business that says, here's what I'm using right now, and here's what it costs me right now. And that's a real benefit, and it's an incentive for people to conserve a whole lot more than we do now. Appliances will be able to be controlled if customers want that. There's so many different things, interactive, that can happen. So it's not just a metering system. That's the obvious. That's the piece we'll all see. But it's what that system and data will do over time. And there's far, far more to it than I've described, but I've tried to hit the high points for you. So as you can see, with that in mind, in implementing this project, it's going to take quite a bit of resource from GWP. We've already put a number of our existing people onto this project. We have a full-time project manager. We have an overseer of the project itself from an administrative standpoint, and we have a number of people working on the project along with our outside supplier to get these meters in. However, we still need to set up the organization so that moving forward, it's able to implement and continue to operate the smart grid the way I've described it. So that's what these positions will do. Some of them are reallocated, and some of them will be new, ultimately restaffed from some of the positions we have today, the meter reader type positions. So it's a transition, and we're in a transitionary period.
Just a quick question. My electricity will be out from 9 to 1 tomorrow, the entire neighborhood. Is that what they're doing? They're just switching meters, maybe?
No, that's something completely different. No, when your meter...
I send a bill to when I can't actually bill during those 4 hours, just
No, actually, when we change out the smart meters, it'll just take just a couple minutes.
You won't have any lights at all.
Yeah, no, they said until 1 o'clock tomorrow.
That's different.
Okay. I move to approve.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Devine?
Yes.
Commissioner Gantis?
Yes.
Adkarian?
Yes.
Anukian?
Yes.
Holman?
Yes.
Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you.
You're done.
Next item, please.
Class specification for approval, finance administrator, revenue manager, and collection specialist.
Okay. Mr. Chair, members of the commission, not to be outdone by Water and Power. The finance department is putting forth a reorganization. One of our newer executives, Mr. Elliott, who's actually not quite so new anymore. It's been over a year, but he's had the opportunity now to assess his operation and look at ways of organizing it to where it would be more effective. What the reorganization is proposing is the creation of two distinct divisions, each headed by a finance administrator, and that's the classification, one of the three that you'll be looking at here in this group. One finance administrator would oversee accounting, payroll, and accounts payable. The other would be overseeing budget, risk management, and purchasing. Again, this reorganization is being done with, as far as position control, it's going to be neutral. If you'll look, there is the old organization chart is provided along with the new, and we're eliminating a former assistant finance director position, which many of you recall, Mr. Ehlers. That position is going, as well as another high-level position in the budget area that's being reorganized. So essentially, we'll have two finance administrators, and also within this grouping is establishment of a revenue manager classification and a collection specialist. The revenue manager, of course, would be looking at ways of analyzing revenues and seeing where we can where our forecasting and analysis of future revenues coming from, and the collections function is kind of similar to the revenue protection position within GWP. The focus would be on essentially collections and doing work with our customers and going to court and small claims and things like that. So again, Mr. Elliott is here. If you have questions in general on the reorganization. And again, what we're looking at are the establishment of 3 classifications within this grouping. So.
Any
Are we
post
going to be,
832 issues?
We don't need an engineering degree for this, is there?
Grenade launcher permit?
I'll move for approval.
Second.
Roll call.
Commissioner Gantis?
Yes.
Commissioner Devine?
Yes.
Commissioner Manukian?
Yes.
Kapkarian?
Yes.
Coleman?
Yes. Next item, please.
Class specification for approval purchasing series.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, this also is within the Finance Department, a revision of the purchasing series. We had a recent retirement of our purchasing manager, so we're in the process of going out to recruit for that position this time. And really, I think this is an attempt just to update the series, make sure it's contemporary. Last time it was revised was 2002. We've looked at adding a few new items, including some certifications within the purchasing field that we think would be pertinent or helpful for these individuals to have. Along with that, there's a few other minor changes to the essential functions and job duties. So once again, if you have questions on this, Mr. Elliott is here, and Ms. Martin, I neglected to mention, worked on these specifications for Finance Department.
Move to approve.
Second.
Roll call.
Commissioner Devine?
Yes.
Gantis?
Yes.
Manukian?
Yes.
Kapkarian?
Yes.
Coleman?
Yes. Next item, please.
Agenda forecast.
Mr. Chair, the agenda forecast is before you. Our next meeting, we will not be meeting next week, which is our Thanksgiving. We traditionally skip that meeting, but our next meeting will be December the 9th. We anticipate having a few items for that at this point. Probably some class specifications and maybe a few bulletins. The December 23rd meeting, per the Commission's action, has been canceled as well. So we'll be into January, and the plan is to bring the amendments to the rules back in that second meeting in January. So other than that, if you have any questions or items you'd like to add, be happy to do so.
Hearing none. Next item.
You move the amendment to May 12th, then you don't have to deal with me anymore. Anyways.
That isn't necessarily true.
Necessarily
They
true.
may not have a successor picked for you. Who could succeed you, Mr.
I have
Rafferty?
no idea. At least 199,999 people in the city. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Reports and information passed to employee performance evaluations.
Commissioner Devine, would you like to have the honors?
For the no past dues, we have City Clerk's office, the City Manager's office, City Treasurer's office, Finance Division, Human Resources, Parks and Rec, and Community Services, Planning, and Police. Very good.
Lucky you're here on that day, Chief.
Right. Doing a good job. Under first notices, apparently the city attorney's office has a couple of outstanding. We'll have to take a look at that. Development Services, one. Fire Department has one. Glendale Water and Power, one. Information Services, one. Library, one. And Public Works has one. So all in all, I would say that we're looking very good in terms of the employee evaluation timeliness.
Okay.
Is there a reason why we have 9 from community development and housing?
They're in a transition right now. They have the acting director there, and so they may be a little bit.
Oh.
Does that include planning?
It's going to.
It's going to. They're-
Not currently, but in the new
All right.
reorganization,
Community, they go away, don't they, this department?
the department is going to be merged with 3 other departments. Some elements are going to the Parks Department, some are going to Planning, and some are going to Development Services.
Oh, okay.
You can't give any to the police department, you think? You know, they could use something more to do.
Okay, thank you. That's a good explanation.
Next item?
It's a good point.
Civil Service Commission interstaff comments.
I just have one comment. I want to thank Marina Klein, Human Resources Analyst 2, for putting together all these job specifications in such a manner, really clearly and very, very precise. And without that, we would not have gotten through all of these tonight because we are on a time constraint. And I think she should be highly commended for her hard work on this project, or these projects.
Absolutely.
Yeah, tough specifications, a lot of questions, but we got through them and just very fast because of that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Good
Couldn't have
job.
done it without you.
Good job.
All right.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
just report that the each year, as you know, we do a Civil Service Human Resources Activity Report, which was brought to you at the last meeting, and just wanted to inform the Commission that it did go before City Council last night and sailed through the consent agenda, so it went just fine. So,
Congratulations to you. That's a great
And
report.
another well-done
Incredible.
project.
Thank
So,
you.
deserve thank you to everyone who put it together.
Debbie, Miller.
I just have one comment. I wanted to say how great it is to have our chairman back.
Yes.
And we wish him well and hope to see you every meeting from now on.
I will do my best, and thank you very much. I greatly appreciated it. A number of the commissioners and members of HR have called and are checking in on me. And believe me, that means a lot to me. So thank you all very much. And I've already told Sam that if I'm not feeling well, he can just pick me up, and wheel me into his Bentley and carry me in here. I'll be here.
You left out the part that you said we can stop by at a strip joint.
Okay, I think that covers just about everything in open session.
You've learned.
Sam, sometimes I want to ask the police to shoot you, but I don't have a gun myself.
Why do you guys keep turning off my mic?
There's a reason.
Leave Sam's mic off.
All right, I think we've wrapped up the open portion of today's meeting. We are now going to go into closed session that will not be televised. And are we going to be reporting out?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes, we will report out.
Thank you. Okay.
We have to report out.
I told you guys there's some.